Reason Podcast does not believe in curses or hexes and is unconcerned with what offends you. We do not believe that words have the power to compel spirits or demons to affect your life in any way. If you do, well, there's a reason why the explicit tag is there.
Listening to Reason Podcast. Reason. To think, understand, and form judgments by a process of logic.
Hello, and welcome to Reason. Today is Sunday, March 3rd, and this episode is entitled, Paul is Calling You. We told him the Yeti does not live in the North Pole, and he said, and I quote, at the North Pole. I'm Joshua Billington, along with Paul Whitmire.
How you doing?
And David Ward.
Good evening.
Coming to you live from sunny Buffalo, New York. Reason Podcast is a weekly discussion of events, both current and historical, from a skeptical, rational, and a non-theological perspective. Reason Podcast is brought to you by the Offensive Atheists and the atheist community of Buffalo and Western New York. For further information, please visit our blog and website at wnyatheist.org or email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. Today is a special show. The topic today is apologetics, and we shall be reviewing some of the classic arguments for and against theism. Please call in with your questions, comments, and concerns. The number is 424-243-9589. Additionally, we have a special guest. He's been with us before, and he's joining us yet again, a Mr. Troy Boyle of the National Atheist Party. Let's see if I can bring him in before we begin.
And I would just like to start off by apologizing for our Apologetics show for sounding like I'm calling in from a payphone. I'm not calling in from a payphone, but here I am calling in from a phone, and apparently this is what it sounds like to all of our listeners when they call in and listen. The only thing I can say to that is Stitcher Radio, people. Stitcher Radio. Just saying.
All right. Now let me ask you, Troy, are you there? Well, we'll figure something out with Troy. As of right now, we're going to begin the show with a little bit of apologetics.
Sure.
Fun talk. Up, and I think maybe.
Hello.
Troy, do I have you?
Yeah, this is Troy. How you doing tonight?
Fantastic. Glad to have you on the show again, Troy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. My pleasure to be here.
All right. Now, as you heard, we're going to be talking a little bit about apologetics, and we're going to have a little fun today. Just a fairly laid-back and sportful show. But before we begin, I did want to ask you, Troy, I believe the National Atheist Party is up to something pretty soon. What is that?
Yeah, we are hosting our second annual convention. Our first one was in Schaumburg, Illinois in 2011, and our second one is being held in San Francisco, California on March 9th.
San Francisco.
San Francisco is nice.
Yeah, we have a lot of supporters out that way, so we thought it would be good to have our convention in a place where people were friendly to us.
We're not friendly on the East Coast? We're not friendly in Buffalo, New York?
Yeah, why aren't you up here?
I think you would be. Maybe we can do the East Coast next year.
Well, that would certainly be something that we at Reason Podcast would certainly enjoy and would be happy to participate in as well. Just to throw that out there, because we are fans of the National Atheist Party, and we just can't simply afford to get to San Francisco this year.
Understood.
Yeah, although finding a reason to go out to the West Coast, that is something that I'd be game for. One of the reasons I'm thinking about going to TAM is just so I can go to Las Vegas.
Yeah, I was just going to say we could do the whirlwind. We could head down to Vegas, go to TAM, then we could catch all the shows in Vegas, and then we could head up to San Francisco. And
we could ride the trolleys. We could ride the trolleys.
Who doesn't love trolleys? Well, besides David. David, I bet you don't like trolleys, do you?
I don't.
David the trolley hater. Just saying.
Yes, that conservative religious upbringing hates trolleys.
They're against the Word of God, let me tell you.
So, Troy, for our listeners, if you could, just a real brief summation. I know you probably get asked this question all the time, and it's probably a difficult question to answer very, very kind of succinctly and tightly, but National Atheist Party, what?
What? Well said, Paul. Well said. You, sir, are what I would call a host of caliber I can't even comprehend. I can't even begin to
I really am. And of course, by that, Troy, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the National Atheist Party and how you guys got started and what ultimately you are trying to accomplish?
Sure, absolutely. The thrust of the National Atheist Party is not to turn the world into atheists. It's not to make America an atheist nation with atheist governance and all religion is eradicated. That is not what we're about. The National Atheist Party is a political party that's designed to give atheists a voice in politics, which we have not had in the 240 so years since the nation's founding. Atheists are persona non grata. We're not welcome in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So, I felt it was time to take a public stance and to come out of the closet and to voice the political will of atheists nationwide. So in March of 2011, we formed the party. We established a platform. We wrote a charter and registered with the IRS as a nonprofit 527 political organization, and hopefully will continue to grow by leaps and bounds.
Well, and it certainly seems like you have since your inception. You guys have created quite an organization for yourself. One that I know Josh and I are certainly interested in looking into participating and becoming members. And one of the things that I thought was pretty significant about your political party that I wanted to definitely make clear to all of our listeners out there, because it was an issue for me, was that you're not giving up any sort of membership to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the Libertarian Party or the Green Party or the Rent is Too High Party.
Rent is too damn high. Rent is too damn high.
I'm sorry, the Rent is Too Damn High Party. Don't want to mess that up. But somehow you've managed to finagle it to be an organization that is a political party but doesn't kind of cross over those lines and make you one or the other. Am I correct in stating that?
That's correct. A 527 political organization is devoted to issue advocacy. MoveOn.org, I believe, is another 527 political organization, and the point is to galvanize the membership on political topics that affect atheists or secularists or really anyone who supports the Constitution of the United States, and then throw our weight toward the outcome that supports the Constitution whenever there's something on the table that requires that kind of participation. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to run candidates. We'll certainly run candidates. We would like to run candidates for small, county commissioners, city council, school board, things of that nature, in areas that are atheist-friendly currently, and one day, hopefully, will grow to the size of a Republican Party or a Democratic Party and be a true third option. But until that time, we're not going to put up a spoiler candidate to draw away the necessary few votes that, say, a Democratic candidate might need, to win their seat. We're not going to do that kind of thing.
Right, so the fear that a lot of people had in the whole Green Party or voting for Ralph Nader in many of the past presidential elections doesn't actually exist with what you're intending to do here.
Right.
All right. Now, just before we move on a little bit, do you have the email address, Troy, for us so anybody can actually go take a look at your charter and see where you stand on specific issues and what your what you're planning, and possibly take a look at the upcoming convention?
Sure. Our two websites are www.usanap.org, and you can also find us on Facebook at national.atheist.party. You can send an email to info@usanap.org, and we'll follow up with you via email if that's the way that you'd prefer. But in either case, we have pinned advertisements both at the www.usanap.org site and the Facebook site, detailing everything you need to know about the convention. Our keynote speaker this year is Jamila Bay, and we have Dr. David Carrier, we have Jessica Alquist, we have Aaron Ra, who will be speaking. I'll be speaking, and we'll have musical guests, Shelley Siegel, performing, and it should be a great time.
All right, good deal. And just to ask, I know your organization, like any other political organization out there, could always use a helping hand from volunteers who believe in the cause that you guys represent. Is all the information the same? Is there another place that anyone who is interested in helping out can go and take a look and see what you need? Or money.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid the big red donation button on the www.usanap.org site, but also any interested member can also click on the open positions button, and we have several open positions in the states. We have chapters in all 50 states, and each one of those states needs an executive board, a president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer. Some of those are filled, some of those are not filled. We're still fleshing out the organization. It's still a very young organization. So if you wanted to get in on the ground floor of a political party and an atheist advocacy organization, this would be the time to do it.
See, Josh, that's what we need. Our donation button is yellow. They have a big red one.
That's true. Red is always much more of an attention getter. People go, stop, wait, donate. Well, maybe I will.
Not where, as opposed to our yellow one, which simply says school bus crossing. So
yeah, I think it means speed up.
Yes. Caution, don't donate yet.
Any one of those three things.
None of them.
Okay, well, we certainly support your organization and like to do what we can to help out and further your cause. What we're going to do now is Troy, have you participate as we kind of go through some current events, talk about stuff that's been in the news, and we would love to get Josh and I and David have a particular take on things, and to have your input as well, I think would be interesting. So if you're willing to stick around, we'd love to chat with you about everything from these weird-ass mice that aren't mice all the way to the Holocaust to
God.
Apparently rats. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I was going to start off by talking about a article I found in a letter written to Science magazine. And the letter was written by a Jennifer Sills, and it's entitled Voles, Vasopressin, and the Ethics of Framing. So this article is interesting because the voles are apparently these really, really cute little adorable half gerbil, half mouse kind of animal that we love to do scientific experimentation on, like you do. So one of the things that they have done with these voles, and that's VOLES. I want to make that clear because, again, calling in on the phone line, so it's a little bit different than Josh and I being in the same studio together, and I can't really tell if he's giving me the dirty looks or not, or telling me to move on. He's probably telling me to move on. Yes, he is. Okay, all right. So what they've done is by modulating the density and distribution of vasopressin receptors in specific regions of the brains of these voles, scientists can get ordinarily, quote, promiscuous voles to behave more like, quote, monogamous voles.
Well, I have heard tell of moles. Yes,
I'm sorry?
I have heard tell of their voracious sexual appetite.
Apparently so, but they have been able to mitigate that somewhat by messing with the vasopressin receptors. By the time this research was reported in popular media, however, everything went to shit. And that is usually the case when you're talking about the transition from hard scientific data to what the media portrays as hard scientific data.
Of course.
So by the time this research was reported in the popular media, it had become a story about the discovery of a, quote, gene for monogamy, fidelity, and a gene for promiscuity or divorce in humans. So this is an example of the transition going from hard science all the way to how the media portrays things. Now, there clearly needs to be for lack of a better term, a dumbing down in the media of the scientific information that comes out. Because I don't know if you've spent a lot of time reading a lot of neurobiology journal articles, primary sources, or things like that. Josh and I have. Not because we want to, because we decided 3.5 years ago, stupidly, that it would be a good idea to do that for this show.
And I actually would like to disagree, Paul, if I could. I don't think there needs to be a dumbing down. I think there needs to be a simplification, perhaps. But I don't think that necessarily has to be dumbing down. And I think that's the problem, is it's seen as a dumbing down when it's all.
I agree with you.
It should just be a general simplification to make things a little more digestible to folks without the requisite knowledge, the requisite background knowledge.
I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, I think instead of the simplification, which is exactly what I think should happen, instead we get a dumbing down. We get a simplification beyond anything like that. So, what this article
would have been better if the headline had said something like "Altering brain chemistry can alter the relationship patterns of voles," rather than,
sex hormones
saying a morality gene has been found.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And unfortunately, that is not what most of the media outlets are portraying. Most of the media outlets are portraying that, number one, humans are like voles, meaning humans are exactly like voles, meaning we're 2.5 feet tall, really adorable, and live for about 1.5 years. And that we have found, believe it or not, it's been extrapolated all the way to say that we've found a happiness drug. And then the happiness drug. So we found a drug that mitigates divorce in rodents. And the media has
thought we already had that with cannabis.
Well, yes. Yeah.
Well, that does seem to be.
Yes, but cannabis is illegal.
Oh, yeah, and it's immoral and it's terrible in every way imaginable. I know. I saw it on TV.
Yeah, well, they said it's bad. I mean, did you see
Except in Washington State now, apparently.
So,
yes, that's true.
So this happiness drug, basically, the media is portraying it as something that could save relationships, save marriages, and also has taken this secondary or tertiary spin of how it could be one of the forebears of the dangers of social manipulation. And so we should be afraid of it, and we should ban it like stem cells. So
they're going to put vasopressin drugs in our cereal and make us all much more monogamous.
And docile.
Right, and that is that is what if you listen only to the secondary and tertiary source media outlets who are portraying this stuff. And again, I'm getting this from Science Magazine being a secondary source to begin with. It's not even a primary source journal articles, although it does thankfully have references. But if you go to tertiary sources, or if you go to the New York Times, or for God's sake, Life magazine or something like that, you're going to get a completely different story. And Josh and I have dealt with this a number of times. The fact that you can go ahead and you can trace back the references from the articles that are cited, and realize that they are not talking about anything even remotely similar. And this is the case. And I agree with the both of you when you mention that the problem is not a dumbing down of the information that science is generating. The problem is the problem is not a simplification of the information that science is generating. The problem is a dumbing down of the information that science is generating.
Right.
And so that's I think an example of any number of things, including atheism, including the how something like, for example, the National Atheist Party is portrayed in the media today. And let's kind of just to spin the tale all the way back around. Have you had much in the way of confrontation regarding the National Atheist Party and what you guys are attempting to do, and you want to kill God and you worship the devil and all of the stuff like that? Have you had any misunderstandings by the general media?
That's why I introduced the party when you asked me to sum it up. That's why I introduced it the way that I did, because the criticism that we hear most often is the most inaccurate of all criticisms, and that is, well, you can't base a party around atheism. Well, we haven't. That would. You're right. That would not only would that can't you do it? It's impossible. We haven't based a party on atheism. What we've done is collected a group of atheists and founded a party. It's a completely different thing. If we were a group composed of Eskimos, we'd be the Eskimo Party, and that's the only. That's the only reason that the word atheist is in the party, is because it's a membership descriptor. It's not a what's the word? It's not a crusade.
Right.
The National Atheist Party is not saying, we've decided that atheism is right for us, so it's right for the rest of the country. That's not what we're saying. What we are doing as a party is supporting the separation of church and state, as defined by the Founding Fathers in the First Amendment of the Constitution, that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. So that means the government itself cannot sponsor or endorse any single religion above or beyond any other single religion, or no religion at all. And that, to me, makes perfect sense. When you try and communicate that to the general public, it gets twisted all kinds of different ways. But that is the point of the party.
Right, and I think it's the point of this article as well. I mean, you cannot base a political party on atheism any more than you could base a political party on saying that we should move to a 100% republic. That's not what the Republicans are trying to do. It doesn't appear that the Democrats are trying to move us towards a 100% democracy. These are titles. These are representations of groups who have a certain combined set of ideals, and I think that's pretty much about it.
What does the Green Party want?
They want everything to be green, absolutely everything.
Big fans.
Big fans. We're going to need a lot of green spray paint, and we're going to start with David.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Like we usually do. So yeah, I mean, I think this is another example of something that Josh and I have brought up all too often, is the mistranslation that occurs when we go from the actual data to how the data is explained. And I think
it's clear to me when we hear these criticisms that they haven't read the charter, they haven't read the website, they haven't spoken to any member of the party. They don't know anything about it, and they're reacting solely to the name. Well,
if they actually did some research, they might have some of the answers that would pacify some of their fears, and they want their fears. So they gotta avoid the information at all costs. I mean, come on, man. They're trying to be angry. They're trying to be furious at you for destroying America. If they find out that you're not, they can't be furious. So they have to avoid finding that out.
Right, and I do want to get on to Josh's article, but I just want to plug my friend's theater group, Kaleidoscope Theater Productions, Buffalo, New York. If you ever want to go see a show, you should go see one of theirs. The reason why I bring them up is probably about, Josh, 4 or 5 years ago, they did a show called Polish Joke.
Yeah, it was 4 years ago.
It was 4 years ago. They did a show called Polish Joke. This show was protested by the Buffalo Polish Society, or the Western New York Polish Society. And what was incredibly fascinating about that is it was a pro-Polish play, but they didn't read it.
No, they had
that reminds me of all the criticism that Seth MacFarlane has endured for his Academy Award hosting job when he was satirically and ironically pointing out Hollywood sexism, and then he gets accused of sexism himself.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about depth there. Depth is hard to wrap your brain around. Yeah. Two-dimensional evaluations, that's much, much easier.
This is certainly true. All right, well, let's move on to something sunnier and happier. Josh, I believe you were going to talk about the Holocaust.
Yeah, my article is from the New York Times. It's the Holocaust just got more shocking. I know what you're thinking. More shocking, really? Really, the Holocaust got more shocking? Yes, as a matter of fact, it did.
It can only get so shocking that it peaks.
You would think it's like oil. Eventually, it'll run out. No, there can be an endless supply of shocking revelations. Apparently, 13 years ago, a group of researchers got together for the Holocaust Museum and started doing some research on the Nazi ghettos and the camps and that sort of thing, just to catalog them, just trying to catalog them so we have the data, because apparently nobody had done that before. So the researchers cataloged some 42,500 Nazi ghettos and camps across Europe. Now, 42,500 is a lot.
Yes.
I'm sure it's substantially more than people knew before. I mean, people know about 5, 6, 7 death camps, a couple of dozen ghettos. No, 42,000 during the 1933 to 1945. And the numbers are so much higher than what historians had originally thought that they actually brought in an additional group of historians to analyze the data and make sure they hadn't doubled up or tripled up. They originally knew how horrible the camps and ghettos were, but the numbers were, as they say, completely unbelievable. The documented camps include not only the killing centers, but also thousands of forced labor camps where prisoners manufactured war supplies, prisoner of war camps, cite euphemistically named care centers where pregnant women were forced to have abortions or their babies were killed right after birth, and brothels where women were coerced into having sex with German military personnel. And this was slightly documented. They had some information on this, but after the research, they found 10 times as many as they had actually originally anticipated. The lead editors on the project, Jeffrey Megarry and Martin Dean, estimate that 15 million to 20 million people died or were imprisoned in the sites that have identified as part of this multi-volume encyclopedia, which the Holocaust Museum is publishing. They so far have gotten 2. They've got 5 more planned for 2025. And the thing is, and this is something that I find interesting, is that history is this huge volume of data that we don't really understand. And it requires a group of specialists, a group of people to come together and actually analyze it in detail to find out exactly what it is. Because again, much like science, with history, you don't know what you know until you actually figure out the right questions to ask. They had roles of people, and they had different locations they came from, but no one had actually cataloged to find out how many locations the Nazis had established. And
not only that, but history. There's the old standard phrase that history is always written by the winners. But regardless of winners or losers, whoever is writing down the history is always, by human nature, writing it down with an agenda. Oh yeah, and so the researchers began this again back in 2000. Dr. Megarry had expected that to find perhaps 7,000 Nazi camps and ghettos based on the post-war estimates, but the numbers kept climbing to first 11,500, then 20,000, 30,000, and now they're up to, as I said, 42,500. And the numbers are shocking. 30,000 slave labor camps, 1,150 Jewish ghettos, 980 concentration camps, 1,000 prisoner of war camps, 500 brothels filled with sex slaves, and thousands of other camps used for euthanizing the elderly and the infirm and providing the forced abortions, in addition to Germanizing prisoners or transporting victims to killing centers. Wow. Now, what
they're looking to explain and to show in this is the old argument was that, the Nazis were bad, but, people didn't know the depth or the quantity of what was actually happening at the time, and so you shouldn't be angry with the Germans. But as Dr. Dean, a co-researcher, says, the findings leave no doubt in his mind that many German citizens, despite the frequent claims of ignorance after the war, must have known about the widespread existence of these death camps, of these Nazi camps. You quite literally could not go anywhere in Germany without running into forced labor camps, POW camps, and concentration camps. They were everywhere. And this is part of the whitewashed history that we did following the Second World War. We donated a lot of money. We tried to bring in American dollars and English businesses. We tried to clean it all up. And, of course, we can't do that if we accuse everyone that was alive at the time of being a Nazi. Even, as somebody said more recently, the little Eichmann, the people that helped the machine move forward without actually participating in the dirty business. And this new information seems to be saying that pretty much everyone in Germany, and for that matter in Poland and in Vichy France, pretty much everybody knew what was happening and turned a blind eye. And the argument that these things were out in the middle of nowhere and nobody actually knew what was going on is bullshit. They took every major city and they created zones. They took every area where there was a Jewish population or a Gypsy population, and they created zones, and then they created camps, and they marched them through the cities. They had trains running through there, and this is happening crisscrossing the continent of Europe. And the argument that people didn't know has become much more flimsy. I mean, it's a kind of a horrible way of looking at history to realize that there were that many people, regular people, and I'm not accusing the Germans themselves of being, actively complicit, but the number of people that would have had to have turned a blind eye to the horrors that were occurring is somewhat shocking when you realize that, and they've got a map here, these things go wildly across the continent. I mean, they circle Berlin. Berlin itself is just filled with pockmarks of these things, that they were everywhere, all over Vichy France, all over into the Russian territories that were captured through Poland. They were everywhere. They were unavoidable. And just to deal with Germany...
That makes sense, because, one of the consistent pushbacks by the Holocaust deniers is, how could you have killed, 10 million people in 4 or 5 different locations? It's not logistically possible. Well, now this lends weight to the idea that, of course, it's logistically impossible if you only have 4 or 5 locations, but if you have 42,500, it's much, much easier.
Yeah, right. But that's my big problem, is that we look around and we're not necessarily that different from the German people as a people. The question is, how many people out there would actually stand up? I mean, when you see something that's truthfully wrong, that's objectionable, how many people stand up? How many people went to, how many people that I like the gays. Gays seem okay to me. How many people in those states actually stood up when they were passing amendments and doing things to ban gay marriage, stood up and actually said something? How many people stand up and actually, form a political party, do something which could be considered risky, simply for a group that they do not belong to?
Mm-hmm. And, this really just adds fuel to the fire of the idea that, seriously, people, come on, like, that many people cannot be put on trains or whatever and disappear, and you just didn't notice. Like, really? You didn't notice that? You didn't notice half the population was gone? Come on. And that's the argument that was floated by a fair number of Europeans after the war, after the Holocaust. And it's with the more and more evidence that we get here, the less and less your story holds any water whatsoever. You knew something was going on. Come on, you knew something was going on.
So that was my bright shining light that I would add to the show, is that the most horrible thing that we've got documented in history, well, it's actually worse. And all the people that the Holocaust deniers out there, you're right, that make those claims. It couldn't be done in this grouping. It couldn't be done in these numbers. It can't happen. Well, now that we've examined history a little more, we find out you're right, and it wasn't.
And, I just wanted to add something to that, especially since turns out I don't have a 9 o'clock curfew. What I wanted to add to this was Josh and I both come from a place of certainly not being Holocaust deniers in any way, shape, or form, but there were some questions and inconsistencies about the Holocaust, and Josh and I have discussed it. We looked up the evidence. Josh wrote a very compelling blog piece on our blog, offensiveatheist.com, and in the end, even coming from the position of being completely skeptical, yeah, the evidence is there. Yeah, it happened. Like, that's basically what we found is if you go out and you do the research, you do the legwork, this stuff happens. And now we're finding out from Josh's article that this stuff happened to an even greater extent than we had feared.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I remember watching the films.
Mm-hmm.
In my citizenship class, where they would show the black and white footage of the bulldozers loading the bodies of Jews in the concentration camps into lined pits, and there were obviously hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of corpses in those videos that were just being treated like gravel, like they were filling a pit full of gravel, and so. It makes me wonder how anyone can view that footage and still claim that it never happened. It amazes me every time. I just can't wrap my mind around Holocaust deniers or moon landing deniers, or it's just amazing to me what people are prepared to believe and what they're prepared to reject on the flimsiest of excuses.
It takes a special kind of intellectual gymnastics to pull those off. It really does.
Yeah, and the moon landing is something that Josh and I want to devote a whole show to, because it's one of my favorite conspiracy theories that exists out there. As far as something like 9/11, which we've done our show on 9/11. The anniversary of, which was a very, very difficult show to do. But one of the things that we brought up in that show is the conspiracy theorists love to do stuff like a missile hit one of the Twin Towers, and there were bombs in it. And if it takes 1 second to go, well, if there was a missile, then why did they put bombs in the building? And it's those kind of disparate ideas that are prevalent in all of whichever conspiracy theory you want to talk about.
Yeah, if you already had thermite demolition material around all the structural beams inside the World Trade Center, why fly a plane into it?
Yeah, why not just blow it up?
So they can blame somebody else.
And call it a day. It's nuts.
Yeah. And you find that in every single case of the whack job conspiracy theories that exist out there. Mm-hmm. And if you disagree with Josh and I, if you disagree with all of us, please go ahead and email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. We would love to discuss this with you.
And I actually have a special place in my heart for the moon deniers, because my dad was a career Air Force Master Sergeant, and he worked on the Apollo program, day in, day out, for the entire duration of the Apollo program. So knowing that and visiting him at work and seeing the things come home and the work come home with him and hearing him talking about it, it's amazing to me that someone can just pop up out of Wisconsin and say, this never happened and the United States is trying to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. I even read a statistic lately that said 30% of Russians don't believe we went at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Those wacky Russians.
Well, I actually have the opposite for my end. It's on the 9/11 conspiracy theorists. I've got an uncle who's a 9/11 hoaxer. Is that what they call him? I don't know. Truther.
Sure.
A 9/11 truther, and he keeps coming up with these new and interesting arguments. And Paul, you actually read the book that I was unable to get through the first. I was unable to get through the first paragraph or the first chapter. It was gibberish.
Yeah.
within the first chapter, they had Dick Cheney in 2 geographically distinct and separate locations, which he had to be in for their grand scheme to work. And I went, but you can't do that. And Michael started arguing about how the Bush people are evil.
Oh. No, Cheney can do that.
He used the Force.
Yeah. Cheney has that power. That's one of the things he can do.
There's absolutely no way we could have landed on the moon. Teleportation.
All right, moving on to a lighter subject, I think. David, did you have an article you were reviewing this week?
Oh, sure. Let's see. The title of the article is One Rat Brain Talks to Another Using Electronic Link.
Rat telepathy, ladies and gentlemen. Rat telepathy.
Well, with electronic links.
Oh,
as in
of
wires.
Course. Sure, I mean, not parapsychology,
no. Complete telepathy, but
it's more like rat telephony.
You just wait till the rats have Wi-Fi, then we're all fucked.
Fuck. Yeah. This is an article from the BBC News, and so scientists have connected the brains of lab rats, allowing one to communicate directly to another via cables. The wired brain implants allowed sensory and motor signals to be sent from one rat to another, creating the first ever brain-to-brain interface. The scientists then tested whether the rat receiving the signal could correctly interpret the information. So
could it?
Well, they.
Boy, this has porn implications.
Josh is waiting with bated breath. Oh my God! Can it?
Well, what they did was they took 2 rats and then they linked them by placing a wire roughly the diameter of a human hair into the area of the cortex that processes motor information into each of these rats' brains, and then they put them in 2 separate boxes into different areas of the world, and in each box with the rat was 2 buttons with lights next to them.
Okay.
Now, for one of the rats, the encoder rat would receive a signal by one of the lights turning on that he should press the button. And when he did so, he would receive a little bit of water.
All right.
And then, if the other rat on the other end, which would not receive a signal from the lights, pressed the same button, then both rats would receive a treat of water.
Okay. And so, did it?
I don't want to get to that yet.
This sounds like the prisoner's dilemma. On top of this whole connecting rat's brain, it also sounds like the prisoner's dilemma.
So if I'm ever caught by the cops and I have to be and there's my accomplice is in a separate room, we should have our brains wired together so our stories match.
Yes, you have to prepare for this beforehand, and you have to also get the police to, give you both an ultimatum that you could use that connection for.
Fantastic. So, crime has been solved.
Okay, Josh, I am not robbing a bank with a wire connected to your head.
Oh, come on. It'll be a good time. I'm a thinker. It'll be fine.
Well, we could use it. We could use it to clothesline the bank guard.
There you go.
No, we do it via Wi-Fi. Don't be ridiculous.
So, through these tests, they found that the decoder rat, which is the rat that did not receive a signal, ultimately achieved a maximum success rate of about 70%, as opposed to 50%, which would have been random.
That's okay. That's not great. That's okay. It's greater than average.
Yeah. It's a little anticlimactic. I will say, I was afraid of the telepathic rats.
What you have to keep in mind is that it's not a direct translation. It's not like the one rat is moving and therefore the other one has no choice but to move.
Mm-hmm.
What they have.
Wouldn't that be great if the technology evolves and you can put a transmitter on a pianist's head, say, and then a decoder that cannot play piano at all can suddenly play 70% of Beethoven's Ninth or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We should get on that with thinking.
So what they found was that it took about at least 45 days of training 1 hour a day in order to achieve that result.
I don't know if I could devote an hour a day to being a pianist.
Okay, wait. hang on. We got to stop here because
Okay.
45 days of 1 hour a day training, and the result was simply 20% above average.
Now, I'm not sure if they mean that 70% of the time the rat went for a button and also hit the right one, because he didn't receive a signal at all.
I still don't buy it.
Okay.
I mean, Josh, Troy, can you help me out here? Because I'm struggling with how this is not random chance over 45 days with 1 hour a day training. Am I missing something? I mean, I could just be an idiot here.
Well, that's probably true.
I don't see it's not explained in the article.
It sounds like the rat concluded if I randomly press this button, I'll get some water.
That seems,
possible too.
And 70% of the time, it happened to be right.
Because it was trying, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think that probably would control for the rat learning which button to hit. So you got to figure that there's got to be some sort of control put in there to prevent them from simply learning, because you would think that if they were simply learning, they would hit the button more often whenever they got a signal from their brain. They would try buttons more often. So there has to be some kind of a control that goes into that. Otherwise, you're right, it would just be gibberish.
Well, David, where is this article from?
BBC News.
Is there a reference to a primary source on this?
I'd have to check.
Oh, the requisite research. Damn it!
I'm
Damn
sorry.
it, having to read again.
I'm still a noob when it comes to this. The whole science thing.
You sure it wasn't the Daily Mail?
No, it was not.
The Inquirer.
The rise of
turns out the rat was Saddam Hussein and Barack Obama's love child.
Yes.
Well, I will certainly look at the science article next time to bring more specific data.
When I return from the North Pole, having captured the Yeti, I would like to
and
take
Santa?
a further. I'm not going to capture Santa.
How about a reindeer?
How do you?
Rudolph?
Oh my God! If I capture either a reindeer or Santa, either way, the whole Mrs. Claus, she's not going to give me the brandy. And then what am I going to do?
You're going to ruin
at the North Pole.
Christmas. But then we get an
I'm going to
episode about how Reason Podcast saves Christmas.
Or ruins Christmas.
Pretty much ruined Christmas. Reason Podcast ruined Christmas because atheists say Happy Holidays. Ha ha.
That's right.
Because atheists have a war on Christmas.
They do indeed. I know I do. I hate Christmas, I hate trees, and I hate holly. I hate holly so much. You have no idea.
Mistletoe? That's good stuff.
I hate holidays in general. I think I'm a Jehovah's Witness, but no, that's not right either.
Yes.
I think atheists should have their own day where they get to do nothing or have some kind of celebration too. Reason Day, something like that.
Yeah, we should really pick a day like that, just to have a party, because you want to know why? Parties are great. Why not have a party?
Well, I think that's what's missing. That's what's missing from the atheist movement, because all the other religions, they give you a party here, a party there, and it's probably a party where you already had one. You're a pagan? Well, here, you can have Christmas now. It's not Yule, it's Christmas. You can still have your party. That's the problem, is atheists want to take away people's parties. And I think that's why we're having a lot of trouble getting our movement going, is that people think we don't party.
Even Kwanzaa has a party, and they're like an hour and a half old.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, when I say March 11th from now on, which was the founding day of the National Atheist Party, should be Atheist Day.
March 11th is Atheist Day? Does that mean I don't have to go to work?
March 11th.
I can sit home and drink and basically stay in my underwear all day? Is that the?
Just look at your boss, very very conspiratorially, and say, I have to do atheist things.
Yes.
Yeah, all those sneaky, underhanded atheist things.
You don't happen to have a baby you won't miss, do you?
Not those agnostic things that are, ambiguous, but atheist things.
Yeah, I'm not sure I accept whether or not agnostic things really do exist. I'm on the fence about that.
that may be true.
All right, so we will be right back, folks, discussing basically God, arguments for God, Christianity, apologetics in general. All right, folks, so We'll see you in just a moment.
Do you have questions, comments, concerns, or random musings? Email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. Out of boredom, you should check us out on Twitter and follow @Reason Podcast. We appreciate it when folks retweet us because it makes us feel smart and important. Listen live Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern on blogtalkradio.com. Call in, join the conversation at 424-243-9589. Can't listen live on Sundays because you're too busy praying to whatever gods you believe in? We are also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and you can download the show from wnyatheist.org/reason.php. Find us on Facebook at Reason Podcast, and go ahead and like us. We'll take your liking us as loving us, and that will sufficiently satisfy our egos. We know you're out there, we know you're listening, and we appreciate it more than these words can say.
All right, and we are back discussing apologetics and, God.
Proofs for God.
Well, yeah.
Even though I wrote apologetics on my piece of paper 3 times, and Josh yelled at me 3 times, either way, we're going to move forward.
Okay. Now, I went through very, very quickly and just picked a couple of the more fun arguments for the existence of God that we can have a little bit of sport with before I think David and I, and Paul and Troy as well, if you like, can join in and have a little bit of sport where I try and prove that Christianity is clearly true. On the fly, based upon whatever comes at me, because, man, I love to argue. But first, a couple of the run-of-the-mill basic arguments for the existence of God, just for anybody out there that has been living in a cave. And we'll go through some of my favorites. And if anybody else has one, please bring it up and we can discuss that one as well. But I did want to begin with the first cause or the primary mover argument. It's one of the oldie and the goodies. First formulated by Sir Thomas Aquinas. Is it Sir Thomas Aquinas? It's Father Thomas Aquinas. Whatever. Which is,
I believe he was knighted. Sounds good.
It does. I'm going to go with Sir Thomas Aquinas because you know what? What the hell? I can do that. No one's proven me wrong, and that's the way the media works nowadays. You make a statement, and if nobody proves you wrong, it's true.
Let's put it this way: if Thomas Aquinas was not knighted to this point, Reason Podcast knights him. So,
do we have that kind of power?
Thomas Aquinas.
Huh, yes, that's nice.
Of course we do. We just said we did.
That's true. Good point.
You know those rules? We don't have to follow those rules.
All right. So Thomas Aquinas originally said, "Nothing is caused by itself. Every effect has a prior cause. This leads to a regress. This has to be terminated by a first cause, which we call God." All right? Seems fantastic. I don't see what could possibly be wrong with that argument.
Me either.
So far, so good.
Everything has a cause, except the first thing, because the first thing has to be the thing that starts all the causes, all the cause and effect chain. Therefore, the first thing, God. Problem solved. And there's no religious undertones to it. Could be the Big Bang. Could be any number of things. There's simply a first cause, which Thomas Aquinas chooses to call God. There you go. Right. Proven God. Now, there are a couple of basic problems with this argument, and this argument comes up quite a bit from the layperson. The more experienced apologist probably will not fall onto this one simply because it's got one glaring flaw, which is premise 1 is that nothing is caused by itself, and the conclusion is there's something which causes itself. So
I would say of all of these arguments, Josh, that you're going to go through, as far as I know, this first cause, this first mover argument is the one you are absolutely 1,000 times more than any other most likely to see on Facebook posts, in chat rooms, places like that. This is the one that kind of pops into people's heads first, and they throw out there.
Well, a lot of times you get into the scientific aspect of it, and they will fall into, at least to some degree, into that argument, well, what caused the Big Bang? And since you can't properly explain it, because we don't really know what caused the Big Bang, they say, well, therefore, God. And that doesn't really hold any water, because it goes back to the same thing, is, okay, so why God? Because.
I have a different problem with it.
Please.
And that is that if you're going to posit God, then you have to posit the source material. The source material is the Bible. The first cause argument is anti-biblical. So if you have an argument for something that's in direct refutation of its own source material, then it falls apart as in that respect, because the Bible doesn't say that God was a first mover who set the universe in motion and then basically screwed off. The Bible says that God created the universe and the earth directly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do think there's the argument that we're not actually speaking necessarily of the God of the Bible here.
Well, that's actually
Stunned silence.
No, if you're not speaking of the God of the Bible, then you can't use the word, because that's the source material. That's the concept origination. That's where God's from, the Bible. If there was no Bible, we wouldn't be having the conversation. You wouldn't be talking about God.
Well, that's the problem with making these arguments, is that to make the argument even slightly coherent, you have to differentiate from the source material, which is how we had during the Age of Enlightenment that rise of deism, because they actually fell victim to this argument. Well, the primary mover is God, except that God can only be a deistic God, a God that, like you said, set the watch in motion, and then the watch just ticks away till it runs out of juice, and doesn't interfere or participate, which is exactly what the God of the Bible does, is sets everything in motion and then, fiddles with it. Mm-hmm. Provides morality, then kills everyone on Earth, and then, I assume, floods the Earth to kill the dinosaurs. Any number of things that God does, which,
like genocide in Egypt and whatnot, right?
Oh, genocide's everywhere. Think about my namesake, Joshua. He was a son of a bitch. Every man, woman, and child, everything that breathed. Man, what a dick. And that's who I'm named after. But, yeah, this argument I've never felt held much water, because it does, first off, it is self-contradictory. Next, it doesn't prove the biblical God, and in fact, in a lot of ways, it does contradict the biblical God. It proves, at best, a deistic God, which I guess, to some degree, depending on when you read him, you'll get your Thomas Jeffersons or your Ben Franklins were fairly deistic in that they believed in some sort of, pantheism, some sort of God-ishness of divinity, but no Godhead, no Yahweh or Elohim or what have you. None of those guys, just, a general magic to the universe, which is not that dissimilar from your Einsteins or Spinozas, who believed in pantheism, that, the universe is God, no consciousness, just all of everything is pretty groovy, and that's worthy of worship.
And ultimately, if you want to play this game, if you want to go ahead and say, well, what caused the Big Bang? And we can say that, according to Einstein's E equals MC squared, we can say that since energy and matter spontaneously interconvert before any matter existed, the universe was nothing but an undefined, non-Cartesian mass of energy. Well, okay, then that's God. But I just gave it that name. I could have called it Kool-Aid Man.
Ralph.
Oh, yeah.
Ralph the Kool-Aid Man. Yes, indeed. That's my religion. And I drink the Kool-Aid. All right. Unless anybody has anything else to say about the prime mover, I think that's a pretty silly one, but it is one of the oldest and one of the most resilient arguments for the existence of some form of God.
Mm-hmm. And again, most popular.
Yep, it is. It's very, very simple. It's got like 3 lines to the argument. It's easy to follow. People can express it and act like they know something. They like it. Next, I wanted to move on to Pascal's wager, which is another one that you come across in your day-to-day arguing with people, is that, well, why not just believe in God? Think about it. If you're right, you get heaven. If you're wrong, well, nothing happens. Whereas if you choose not to take the wager, if you're right, nothing happens, and if you're wrong, damnation. And I assume rats chewing on your body for eternity while you're on fire, so they don't really express what hell is supposed to be. It's bad.
Are these rats connected at the brain?
No, they use demonic
telepathy?
I was going to say Bluetooth. Demonic Bluetooth.
Demonic Wi-Fi?
Okay. Yes. But that's...
Every time the light goes off, they chew on you a little more.
That Satan is a son of a bitch. Turn the light off again. But this is another one of the arguments, and in response to this, I can only call up my personal favorite section of The Simpsons, which is Homer Simpson's refutation of Pascal's wager, which goes something along the lines of, what if you're worshiping the wrong God, and every time you go to church, he just gets more and more angry with you? And, Pascal's wager works fine when you have a Catholic-dominated, environment where everybody belongs to the same religion. So if the Catholics did, win the holy wars, they killed all the Buddhists and the Muslims, and let alone the Protestants, sons of bitches. They just killed everyone. There were only Catholics. Then Pascal's wager would at least hold some water, in that it is a true dichotomy as opposed to this false dichotomy that's invented. Because I'm pretty sure that Allah really doesn't like it when people worship Jesus. Gets really, really pissed. So if the Muslims are right, you're fucked, and vice versa.
Well, there's thousands of different sects and denominations of worship out there. So the Pascal's wager boils down to the simple fact that everybody knows the house always wins. You can't beat the odds. You can't trick God or any of the other 999,000 gods that are out there. It's a fool's gamble.
Well, it goes back to the other argument.
Well, that's another hole in it, which is that if you worship because you have weighed the odds and you have discovered that it's in your favor to go ahead and worship, then the omnipotent deity is going to pierce that rationalization and know that you're simply playing the odds rather than really, genuinely worshiping, and so you're screwed anyway.
Yep.
Right, and that's the other aspect is like, so your all-powerful God is not going to know that you're just doing this, just to win a bet.
Well, he does like to gamble.
You actually give a shit.
Right, but that's my big problem with this is that it's an appeal to emotion. It's an appeal to fear. It's that's the whole thing, is believe in God or burn forever, or at least maybe, but why take the risk? And it really is simply those people that are raised in an environment where they're taught to fear their omnibenevolent creator, that they're scared into this, and I don't think it actually works with anyone. I don't really think any of the arguments are compelling to someone else. But specifically, this one doesn't seem like it could convince anyone, because you're right. God would know if you were bullshitting. Therefore, you go to hell anyway. And you've got to worship the right God, which would probably require research, and all that research would probably turn you into an atheist. So I think Pascal's wager, to get it right, turns you into an atheist. So fairly straightforward. Pascal's wager, also one of the flimsier ones. I don't think that there's much more needs to be said specifically about good old Pascal, Blaise Pascal.
Do a radio show from a phone in the hospital.
All right. Next, we're going to have the argument from design, which is one of the more convoluted ones. The argument from design is it changes and alters depending. I mean, there's the classic, the watchmaker. That everything fits together.
Refuted.
Well, yeah, but I mean everything fits together perfectly like a watch. I mean all the little cogs come together, and if they didn't, the whole system wouldn't work. I actually did pull up Ray Comfort's Divine Painter, which I'll read his argument now.
Ooh! Can you read it in his voice?
Divine Painter.
Divine Painter. Yes, Ray Comfort's
I don't think I'm familiar with this one.
Oh, this then you'll be pleasantly surprised. I think it'll turn you around on Christianity, and I think by the time I'm done with this,
Ray Comfort apparently.
Yes, oh yeah, and bananas. you will be a devout Christian at the end of this, and you will see the light of Jesus El Christos. Okay. First, I would say that I can prove that anyone who looks at a building and says that he doesn't believe that there was a builder is a fool.
Thank you.
This is because a building is absolute proof that there was a builder. Buildings don't build themselves from nothing. Only a fool would believe that. Okay? I'm with you so far. So far, I agree with Ray Comfort. Second, I would say that anyone who looks at a painting and believes that there was no painter is a fool. The painting is absolute proof that there was a painter. Paintings don't paint themselves.
Have you seen Jackson Pollock's paint?
Well, that actually, truth be told, I'm just, so right there. Jackson Pollock disproves Ray Comfort. But he says again, only a fool would believe that a painting was not painted. Then I would say that creation is absolute, 100% scientific proof that there was a creator. A creation cannot create itself from nothing, but that's what the atheist believes, that nothing created everything from nothing. That's a scientific impossibility, and only a fool would believe that. Let me ask you, are you a fool? Well, nice. Are you a fool?
No, but I am a straw man.
Yeah, and it goes back to that. This is one of the ones that bothers me. It's such a simplistic way of looking at reality that I can't imagine. I guess this would probably work on elementary schoolers.
Yeah. Little kids, yeah.
Yeah, but it just does not make any sense because, when it rains, puddles develop. Did I create a puddle? No, the puddle just happened. Why? Happenstance, circumstance. That's
physical laws.
Right, there are rules and laws. Things interact in a certain way, and it creates this thing I look to and I go, look, a puddle. Simple as that. No one created it. It was an uncreated puddle. Therefore, I win.
The argument from design really, really heavily piggybacks on this complete and total misunderstanding of natural selection.
Yeah.
Of this idea that things don't just happen randomly. You can't randomly take a bunch of electronic parts and throw them on the floor and they become a clock radio. That's true. You can't just randomly do that. But the idea of natural selection, combined with the fact that the Earth is older than 6,000 years old, you fucking morons, is the driving force behind these things slowly coming together in a way that simply makes the most sense entropically and I can't say enthopically and
sure, you can give it another try.
Enthopically.
There you go.
That's what I'm doing. It. Fuck you, physics vegan Brian.
Indeed. Well, one of the problems I have with this is that it, first off, it's the basis for, I was going to say creationism, but it's intelligent design, which sounds so much better. But, you think about, the garbage dump doesn't spontaneously create a 747. If you just randomly hit keys on a typewriter, you will not create Shakespeare's works. But then somebody actually sat down with a program where they said, well, anytime a word occurs, that word stays because the word is beneficial. It's a word in English. And if then you run the program, then you actually do, even through random keystrokes, eventually you will create the collected works of William Shakespeare because of the natural selection portion, which is often left out. And without the natural selection, sure, it just seems like chaos. Of course it couldn't work, but there's a feedback loop. Things that are successful, and then build upon those things. And you will eventually get the collected works of William Shakespeare due to nothing more than random keystrokes with the computer saving any time that there is an actual English word. It takes years of the computer simply running. I wish I had the paperwork in front of me from the test that they ran, but the program produced it in, something like 4 or 5 days of simply just running a program. Yeah, it was, I actually, in just a moment, maybe I'll look it up and try and find that because I found that fantastic. I'm trying to do it off the top of my head. I was also reminded of the peanut butter that never spontaneously creates a new form of life, which was another argument that somebody had wasn't your Ray Comfort, it was somebody else that said that every time you open peanut butter, you always find peanut butter. You never find a brand new form of life, and you would if evolution were true. And that was again.
And there's the ultimate argument, which I can't remember, and I can't look up the guy's name because there's very, very shoddy Wi-Fi at the North Pole here. But it was the flagellum from a bacteria.
Yeah.
It was the Dover case. It was
irreducible complexity. Yes, sir. Behe.
Yes.
Yes.
See, David's good for all kinds of things.
Oh, thanks.
Well, the idea with that, just to explain to everyone who may not be familiar, is their court case entirely stood on the fact that they were trying to prove that intelligent design was a legitimate scientific theory, and they said, look at the flagellum. There's no way a flagellum could possibly have evolved from any other mechanism. And the next day, a legitimate scientist came in and showed a bacteria or a virus that actually had a stationary flagellum, same sort of structure that flagellums have, with 8 inner tubes and 8 surrounding tubes, and then 2 inner tubes on the inside that didn't rotate, that didn't flagellate, that didn't move any bacteria or virus along, but turned out to be a very effective mechanism for injecting RNA into the nucleus of a cell, and then they lost that case. And that was the strongest evidence that they had after years and years and years of legal and scientific research into this whole thing.
And I just spent just a couple of moments looking this up. It's what I was talking about just a moment ago was the infinite monkey theorem, which is one of the arguments they have against evolution, that they ran through, and in I'm getting to it. Don't worry. I'm confident I will find this. And I don't have it handy, and I apologize for jumping in.
There are 2 things about design that bother me, and the first one is the complete ignorance of the idea that a simple life form can form during abiogenesis, and then that life form can begin to variegate in order to fill other niches in the environment. If you do just a little bit of that in your mind, mathematically, you can see, that one first proto-slime mold may differentiate into one that prefers a more acidic environment, one that prefers a less acidic environment within, just a few generations. And that kind of variation is what continued on to develop human beings. It's like they're looking through the wrong end of the telescope. We're sitting here as the end products of 6.7 billion years of evolution, and they're saying, look how well adapted to the environment we are. Or no, look at how well the environment suits us. Right. When in reality, we have adapted to it through natural selection. It's like the puddle, like you said earlier. The puddle sits in a pothole and says, "Look how great I fit this pothole. It must have been designed for me."
Yeah. The argument from design is very similar to Pascal's wager in the fact that these, and actually, if you really think about it, all of these proofs of God or apologetics for the scientific material that we have, every single one of them is an argument from ignorance. It all boils down to an argument from ignorance. I don't understand how that could have possibly happened. I don't understand how a flagellum could have possibly formed. I don't understand. So magic. God of the gaps. And that is ultimately what this all boils down to. So, but there's a couple of more to go through here, Josh.
I was going to say, unless you've got something else to say about this, something to do with complexity or who knows. Oh, my 2 arguments against the argument for design, and I think they're fairly good and they're solid. Number 1, testicles, and number 2, that the days in the year is actually 364.247. Because testicles are a terrible, terrible design. What a fucked up design. Why not just make? You didn't
even go with my favorite one, though.
Which is that?
Well, God created Adam in the Garden of Eden, and Adam was bored as fuck. So after a while, he created Eve. Adam has nipples.
Well, maybe Adam didn't have nipples. That's just the paintings.
You think maybe God just kind of threw on nipples afterwards after being bored with no Eve. He's like, why do I look all different like?
No. I think that nipples obviously come from the maternal line. So if we got two men to have a baby like the gays want to, I've seen that on Fox. If we have two babies made up of only men, they would come out clearly no nipples. I think that's clear.
So you're saying remove the X chromosome and replace it with another Y?
Yes.
And it won't have any nipples.
Right. There may be some other things missing as well, but I'm going to say, I think that's what it is. I think that solves the problem. Then get rid of nipples. So if you want to get rid of your nipples in children, just clone yourself and get rid of the X chromosome.
All right.
Problem solved.
Have the gay sex.
Yes, gay sex.
Gay sex leads to no nipples.
Exactly, and that's a fate worse than death, I think. I mean.
Well, don't forget, Adam and Eve are always painted with navels.
Yep, they've all got belly buttons.
Yep.
Every one of them.
Nipples and navels and all kinds of things that don't make any goddamn sense.
You can't go overthinking these things. We're talking about religion here.
Oh, yes, sorry. My bad.
All right, and another one I've come across pretty common out there in the internets and talking to people is the argument from the meaning of life.
Okay.
Because without a creator, what's the meaning of life after all? Why are we here? Therefore, God. And that comes in, thousands of different shapes, thousands of different forms. I mean, hell, it comes with what is the purpose of my life? Why do I go on? Why are humans here? Why? And it falls back in the same question I tell the 4-year-old I talk to, why is the wrong question? It's not why. It's almost never why. If you ever ask a question and you begin with why, you're probably asking the wrong question. It's almost always how. Whys imply a doer. The word create, right. All of creation, well, that does imply a creator. The English language is biased because it developed with theism involved. So there are a lot of words that are leading that push people into these situations that, they're asking the wrong question. They're using the wrong words. And that's always been my problem with the argument, with this particular argument, is that it's people asking the wrong question. What's the meaning of life? Well, there's always the answer the self-help people will give you. The meaning of life is to have a meaningful life. There you go. Problem solved. No God necessary.
Yeah.
And that's self-help 101.
Existentialism probably provides the best answer to that particular argument, because in existentialism, the meaning of life is self-assigned. Mm-hmm. You decide what life means for you, and there you're done.
Right, and that seems to work, and there's no God necessary.
Exactly.
So that one I'm not sure requires a whole lot of commentary, simply because it's stupid. But
it really is stupid, and it is, again, another example of an argument from ignorance. If there is no God, then why are we here? There could be a million, a billion, a trillion reasons why we are here that don't require a God.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. I believe the
even if you remove your why versus how, which by the way is a very legitimate position, but even if you bypass that, you still get to the point of well, if there is no God, why are we here? Anyone who's familiar, and this is a really old book, so probably not, but anyone who's familiar with the book Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut, the entire existence of the human race was to create a specific shaped metal object to help aliens get off of Pluto.
Yep.
That was the entire existence of the human race.
And after being asked about that, Kurt Vonnegut said, I tell you, we are here on Earth to fart around, and don't let anybody tell you any different. And that's Kurt Vonnegut speaking the God's gospel truth.
And there you go. And now we seem to be on to the one that I consider to be a nightmare, not because it's one that I don't feel there's a refutation for, but just because it's one that tries the hardest out of all of these to obfuscate and use doublespeak and confusing language in order to try and trick the non-believer into a confusion, I guess is the best way to put it. Please, Josh.
Well, this is one of my favorites because I really like it when philosophy creates new words and redefines things halfway through a sentence and changes everything. It's the ontological argument. Uh-huh. Yep. I love the ontological argument because it's so obviously bullshit, and yet it seems accurate-ish, but is obviously bullshit. I'll give you the classic example. God is the greatest imaginable being. That's part of the definition. All else being equal, a being or entity that exists is greater than one that does not. Therefore, God exists. Because existing is greater than not existing. God is the greatest imaginable being. Therefore, God would have to exist. Or they also go through perfection. God is totally perfect, and a perfect being would possess existence as one of its attributes. Therefore, God exists. Or other such things where they're using leading words and leading terms to create an argument that's obviously bullshit. And one of my favorite ones about this is the number of people that have argued against this by simply creating a syllogism of their own.
Yeah.
Let us define a unicorn as a magical equine being that has one horn and that exists. By that definition, such a being must necessarily exist. It exists, after all, within its own definition. Therefore, unicorns exist. And you can do that with, pretty much anything. Hercules, Thor, whatever, as long as part of the definition of the term you have just invented requires existence as part of the definition, therefore it exists.
Although I'm not a fan of it myself, this is the genesis of the flying spaghetti monster that atheists and agnostics are oh so familiar with.
Yes. Now, there's a slightly better, what they call the modal ontological argument, which is a little bit better, it's a little bit cleaner, but it's still the exact same gibberish argument. It is possible that God exists. If it's possible that God exists, then God exists in some possible worlds. If God exists in some possible worlds, then God exists in all possible worlds. If God exists in all possible worlds, then God exists in the actual world. If God exists in the actual world, then God exists. Conclusion, God exists.
Fuck.
I know. Somebody worked really hard on that.
Unless your a priori supposition is that God is impossible.
Or that God exists but is made of cheese. Therefore, cheese is divine.
Or your a priori position is that God doesn't necessarily have to be all-powerful in the way that you're defining it.
Right. I mean, if you want to define God as the most powerful being or as the most powerful thing in existence, I bet you there's a black hole or a quasar or something out there which falls well into the definition of God, the most powerful thing in existence. Problem solved. There you go. I'm a believer.
Yeah.
So it all falls down to definitions.
The thing that I run into most often as president of the National Atheist Party, the argument that gets thrown at me more often than any other is none of these.
What do you get?
What I get most often is the argument from allegory. Every time you have an argument with an apologist and you bring up something biblical that is contradictory or something biblical that is currently known to be impossible or in error, that section is immediately identified as an allegory by the apologist. And the funny thing about that to me is, for instance, let's take something at random. The creation of the earth in the Genesis story, where he creates the land before the water and creates light in two different places. He creates light before the sun, which was pretty funny.
That's badass. That's some godly skill there.
Yeah, really, that's some amazing, miraculous work there. But what I've usually said in refutation of that is, well, we know that the earth, it accreted as part of the solar accretion disk, and we've photographed that. We can see it in action in other solar systems, so we know that's how it happened. And then they'll say, well, maybe he didn't create the earth that way, that's just allegorical. Well, they didn't teach it as allegory in 300 AD, and they didn't teach it as allegory in 1300 AD. They didn't even teach it as allegory in 1900 AD. It only became allegorical in 1995 or so, in 1998, when the solar accretion disk theory was first proposed. And we know now that the sun is a second-generation star. It's not even a first-generation star. It's made of the remnants of an earlier star's death. Mm-hmm. So how could God have created the sun if it's a second-generation star? And again, they say, well, then it's an allegory. Well, how far back are we going now? Well, it's allegorical.
My problem with the allegory argument, and it falls down to, okay, I will accept your premise. That's an allegory. How do I decide which parts are allegorical and which parts aren't? Was the resurrection allegorical? What about the Ten Commandments? Do I need to follow those, or were those allegorical? How do I find out which parts are really real and which parts are allegory? And better yet, how do you know which parts are allegory and which parts are true? What about the,
right.
What about
I got it.
So Lot had sex with his daughters.
I ran.
So was that allegory or was that actually history? Was, when God killed everyone on earth in the flood, was that allegory? How do I know which part's allegory and which part's actual, real? How do I know which part to care about? Do I kill people or is that part allegory? That's the thing that drives me insane, is that you can say that you know which parts are allegory and which parts aren't. Okay? How? Where's the content that tells which books are allegorical and which ones aren't? And if you say that don't question God, I can say, well, don't answer for God. How am I supposed to know? And they never like that one.
Yeah, it's always a particularly tough one for people to. That is more than anything. I think that is the thing that creates the cognitive dissonance in people's heads. They freeze, they get angry, they accuse you of attacking, and then they leave.
Well, they accuse me of being a Satanist.
Yeah.
That's how you know you've won.
An angry Satanist.
Well, yeah, Satanism is a very angry religion.
Not a nice Satanist.
I was called atheist scum today.
Oh, nice.
Just today, by a person who identified themselves as a, quote, hardworking atheist, or a hardworking Christian.
Oh, a hardworking Christian. Well, better than those lazy Christians.
Did you perhaps explain that, pond scum or sea scum was actually the genesis and origin of all life on Earth, so in fact it's probably closer to God than anything that person could have brought up?
It's funny, that's exactly what I said.
Yeah?
I said abiogenesis probably occurred in simple slime, molds, and scum in tidewater pools, so you're calling me something that's quite divine.
Yeah, there you go.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah. All right. Now, moving on from these, does anybody else have another good, a fairly juicy argument for the existence of God? Because I tried to cover the ones that I hear the most. You're right. The allegory was forgotten. What else have you got?
I have one that's particularly close to my heart. Jesus has touched my heart, and you're poopy.
Yeah, I couldn't even get to that one because then what are you supposed to say to that?
There is nothing. There is no argument against, well, I feel Christ inside of me, because I can't touch that. I can't do anything with that. You believe that, you go on your merry way. Some people, feel the next door neighbor's dog telling them to kill them inside of them. There's nothing I can do short of medication.
Yeah, that's truly delusional. I speak to God every day. All right.
Well, all right. As long as God doesn't tell you to kill me, I guess that's fine. Just keep that shit to yourself.
Yeah, there's levels. There is no God. I'm not sure if there is a God. God speaks to me every day. I speak to God every day, and then at the top, I speak to God every day, and He talks back. Yeah. And that's probably my greatest concern.
Yeah, when He talks back, that's when I step back a little bit and go, oh, really? That's nice. I'm going to go now.
That reminds me of Dr. Andy Thompson's work in Why We Believe in Gods, where he talks about the fact that functional MRI scans have proven that when someone is in the state of believing that they're in communication with God, either whether it's through prayer or meditation, or whether they feel like they believe they're hearing God's voice, they have found in functional MRI scans that the exact same area of the brain lights up or experiences activity as lights up when you talk to yourself.
Well, Troy, as someone who spent about 7 years in a graduate PhD program for chemistry, who understands what a Fourier transform MRI is, my favorite question to ask someone like that, what's an fMRI?
Functional MRI scan?
Yeah, what is it? To the person who's declaring that an fMRI shows clearly that God exists, my question to that person would be, and I'm not asking you because I don't think most people do understand what a Fourier transform is. That's fine. There's no reason to unless you're, a radiologist, a medical doctor who studied these things. But my question is, what is an fMRI? If you're telling me that you have absolute proof that God exists because of this fMRI thing, then clearly you know what an fMRI is. So
I think you may have misunderstood the ending of that story there.
Perhaps I did.
Yes, a little bit, just a little tiny bit.
Yeah, the story is to prove that there is no God and that the experience of God is merely a neurochemical reaction that's the same as talking to yourself.
Yeah,
I apologize. I got about 5 different things going on here.
Yeah, you're misinterpreting your own imaginative voice and your own internal voice as coming from God or Jesus, when in fact it's self-generated, much like a dream.
Well, Michael Shermer, who wrote a number of books and is at least used to be the editor for Skeptical Inquirer, he wrote a book called Why People Believe Weird Things, and he subjected himself to an fMRI with also, I believe, gamma ray scalpel injection to the specific area that they say lights up when people experience religious overtones and feelings, and he reported that he did see, or not see, but he did experience something undefinable to him. He didn't define it as God. He defined it as a sensation that he could not quite quantify, which could easily be interpreted and translated to be God. So we do have this area in our brains that does seem to want us to form connections, ostensibly with other human beings and form communities with other human beings, and that could very well be the genesis of that area.
Or also facilitates our ability to have introspection and self-inventory and self-reflection. Yeah.
Yes. And now I feel bad. I apologize for misunderstanding your story.
I was listening going, what the hell is he saying? Wait, what? Yeah.
It's a great book. Dr. Andy Thompson is a great guy, and he spoke at our first convention. So Why We Believe in Gods, I believe, is the title of the book, and it's a real page-turner. Mm-hmm. He's also on the board of the Dawkins Foundation.
Okay. Well, in general, when the religious folk like to bring out the scientific data to back up the pseudoscientific claims, it is a personal enjoyment of mine to ask them if they do understand the science of what they're saying, because very frequently they do not. When you talk about tree ring growth or what they find in bones, what they find in archaeological digs, a simple question of, what does that mean, usually will lead to stumping the person. I
was a biology major at the University of New Orleans and an anthropology minor before I switched to law. And I always ask people, well, what is the stratigraphy of that find? And was there any solar fluxion found at the find? And how did you use provinciating to place the find where it was in the time, in the epoch? And they just get stunned because they don't expect you to grill them on the science.
Right. And, I would actually be fine if they could say, well, I don't know. But that is 9 times out of 10 not the answer. that the pseudoscientist or the believer gives you. If they say, I don't know... I'm sorry?
They usually just repeat at that point. Well, I've read many studies that say blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
Where were these studies? In, like, books?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that, I think, ultimately, before we kind of wrap up and move on to Josh and I yelling at each other, I think ultimately is the difference is us on the side of skepticism and scientific research are the ones willing to go, well, what happens before the Big Bang? We don't know. Oh, well, if you don't know, it's the same as Ray Comfort when he goes on the Atheist Experience and says, you guys don't know how old the Earth is because you think it's 6 million years old. Do you think it's 8 million years old or whatever? You can't give me an answer. Bible says 6,000. We're done.
Yeah, people that have all the answers are never right. People that have some answers but a lot of questions, those people usually have some pretty good judgment calls.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's ultimately my position on that.
All right. So, unless we have any other interesting proofs for God, anyone? Anything good?
I like potatoes.
Well, we could bring that up. Potatoes do taste good, as though they were designed for our enjoyment. And think about it. I mean, you get potatoes. People live near potatoes. There's grease, you put them together. French fries don't just happen out of nowhere. That's obviously a sign of God's love for us. And that's why bananas fit in your hand.
What else could it be?
Exactly. It's certainly not happenstance. It's certainly not an evolutionary dynamic where two things evolve around each other. No, that would be preposterous. It's obviously God made everything for us because the Earth's already only 6,000 years old. If you get enough false premises in your argument, there's no defeating it. It just is gibberish.
That is absolutely true. Okay, Troy. If you can stick around just for the entertainment's sake, we have our next topic is called "You Are Wrong, and Let Me Tell You Why." Now, just to kind of clue you in on what the deal is here, Josh and I every week we pick a topic. And we have no idea what side of we pick an argument, basically. We have no idea what side we are going to get. Josh flips a coin, and whatever side lands on what, I have to argue, he has to argue, and chances are the coin screws me, I lose, I get the side I don't want to argue, and it all goes to shit.
You always say that, and I think you're full of it.
Thank you, David.
And I think I'm going to paint you green.
All right.
You and Nader. All right, so the argument...
Sounds entertaining.
The topic for this week is, you are completely fucking insane. So, now Josh will take the coin.
All right, meaning,
I will? Yes, you are going to take the coin. Now, what that means is, if it lands on heads, Josh has to argue that I am completely insane. And if it lands on tails, I have to argue that Josh is completely insane.
Okay.
So, are we ready to flip?
Up and go. And it is tails. Oh, it's a buffalo, too. It's the Kansas quarter from 2005. It's got a buffalo on the tail, so it's tails.
Oh.
Which says
somehow
that...
it would have seemed so much easier if you argue that I was crazy.
Well, yes, that is actually quite a reasonable point. But I've got insider information on that one.
All right, so... I mean, clearly Josh is completely insane. He is someone who has, spent his life researching, getting a degree in history and a degree in philosophy, none of which he is actually using right now, but instead is practicing. He has a career in law as a paralegal and does this podcast about atheism once a week. And the problem with that is, he does this show on the air once a week for something that is, although the National Atheist Party is something that's trying to build up our numbers into a greater amount, the amount of audience that we could actually collect from doing a show such as this is minimal, because the number of atheists represents a small percentage of the population of America and the world, for that matter. So the amount of time that he spends, the amount of energy that he spends, is in no way, shape, or form worth the time if you convert time to value, and he clearly is wasting his time every single week. On top of that, he argues with me every single week and clearly loses, and so therefore this is nothing but a Sisyphean task that he just pushes a rock uphill every Sunday so it lands on the top of the hill, so it falls back down again, so we can do it all over again. Now, he talks about history, he talks about current events, and none of these things seem to have any relevance to the general public. He's basically a crazy person who is repeating an action over and over and over again. The definition of insanity is the definition of repeating the same task over and over again and expecting different results. By that definition, Josh has done nothing except for repeat this podcast over and over and over again. Not to mention writing the blog, our blog, The Offensive Atheists, writing that in the hopes that we would actually collect a certain amount of readers, which we don't. And so, therefore, the efforts that he puts out, the information that he puts out into the world falls upon deaf ears, yet he refuses to accept this information and continues on as though someday, some way, somehow, there's going to be a change, and all of a sudden everything's going to be different, we're going to have 1 billion listeners, we're going to have 1 billion readers, and everything is going to be hunky-dory, perfect. Everyone will buy our T-shirts at our store, which you can check out on our website, wnyatheist.org/reason. And that is why he is a crazy person.
I'm sorry. First off, I've got to make take exception to the couple of things. I have degrees in political science and philosophy, not history. I didn't want to take but secondarily, it sounds to me like you're describing me as stupid. Maybe. Crazy, not so much. There are a great many people which fall. I mean, crazy is a completely subjective term. I mean, what's crazy is that which is outside the norm. And there are any number of unemployed PhDs, folks out there with a tremendous amount of education that don't use their education in their day-to-day lives. I will say that my experience in political science, and philosophy for that matter, have helped me substantially in my working as a paralegal. And my quest for knowledge and my thirst for knowledge, which drove me to take 1 billion classes that I got, have no real world benefit from, did give me a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, a lot of things to work from. So I'd say they weren't all that foolish. Not to mention that at the time they seemed perfectly reasonable. I mean, it seemed like the quest for knowledge was an inherent good. And not the ranting of a crazy person. My actions were foolish, but not irrational. I've got to tell you, the dead body I have in my trunk, that happened completely reasonably. It was not a crazy murder. It was nothing like that. It was all very, very sensible, straightforward, intelligent. So I'd say that I'm foolish. Perhaps I was confused or bamboozled by the sale of the American educational system on me. In addition, when it comes to the podcast and the blog, now you're looking at, 5% of the population that says they're atheists, up to about 15%, 16%, depending on the poll, that says that people are non-religious. So yeah, it is an uphill battle to get substantial numbers, but it seems to me that any mind that's been opened, we can put in the win column. So I'd say that all of my endeavors, quite reasonable, quite rational, if not necessarily intelligent. So I think the best you've done so far is prove that I'm stupid, not, my friend, that I'm crazy.
Well, I think it's a fine line between stupidity and insanity. And I think you cross that line by the repetition of the stupidity. If the stupidity happened once, then that would be... Okay, so an example
I would have to be intelligent to learn from my mistakes, wouldn't I?
It would be stupid for you to drop a barbell on your head. it would be insane.
I only dropped a barbell on my head one time. One time I dropped the barbell.
And that is the point I'm trying to make, is that you've only dropped a barbell on your head once. But did you not reveal to me that after you dropped the barbell on your head, you held the barbell above your head and had the fleeting thought that maybe you should drop it on your head again? If that doesn't qualify,
post-traumatic stress disorder is not a form of necessarily insanity. It's a clear condition which derives, which any number of sane and rational people can suffer from, and it will pass. So yes, after I dropped the barbell on my head, the next time I bench pressed, I did have the fleeting thought in the back of my head that said, let go of the bar. And I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. And then I racked the bar, because if I had not racked the bar at that point, perhaps it would have been a sign of insanity. But my being aware of the fact that that was some form of post-traumatic stress, allowing myself to rack the bar, not hold the barbell above my head any longer, surely shows that while I may have had a minor psychological indiscretion, let's say, it's not enough to call it insanity. I mean, please, my working around this and compensating for it clearly shows that I was being quite sane and rational.
Your minor psychological issue would be defined by most people as insanity.
Well, I would have to check the DSM-4 and find out if I qualify, because I don't believe that I do. Ha ha! Appeal to authority, my friend.
In there, actually.
I think
that is but one example of the actions you've repeated throughout your entire life to show that you clearly do not function on a level which most people consider sane. And so therefore, you fall under the category of being an insane person. And so I don't think you can get out of it by talking your way around like you do, like most people don't, like another indication of how your sanity is different from those around you. And so therefore, you qualify for the category of being insane.
Not to say that was complete gibberish and didn't make any sense, because I'm certainly not going to make that comment. Secondarily, I would like to say, in defense of my position, I wholeheartedly think that the idea behind this argument was funnier than the argument has turned out to be. I call that a win on my part, because it is my sane insight which has deduced that this is far less funny than I thought it would be. That being said,
agreeing to this argument is clearly insane.
I think, again, it's a sign of stupidity, not insanity. If you had suggested this argument and I would have said yes, and threw poop at David here, then maybe
you did.
No, don't tell him that. Maybe we'd have an argument for insanity, but truth be told, I believe that I fall well within the bell curve of sanity, not necessarily in the middle, but well within the bell curve, not at any of the extremes. I think that the definition for insanity would need to be fleshed out substantially better than it has been here today before you'd be able to accuse anyone of being insane. And I think that your attempt at doing so goes to show that you, sir, are the one who has questionable sanity. So I think that if the argument was turned around and we were to argue that you were insane, I think we'd have a substantially better argument.
Well, I think you're trying to pull a Vicini here. What you're doing is you are trying to indicate to me that you have, in fact, not thrown poop at David, when clearly he admitted you had. And the fact
David's
that you're
insane.
Denying that you did means that you clearly did. So therefore you did, so therefore you are at least as insane as a monkey.
I'm sorry, my knowledge that it would be socially unacceptable of me to have thrown poop at David, at least at this point in time, shows that I am able to determine what is reasonable and rational from those things which are not. So it goes to show you that the fact that I did not admit to throwing poop at David, whether I did or not, which is irrelevant, the fact that I am able to say that is not something I would have done, truthfully or untruthfully, it doesn't matter, shows that I am currently at least in a state of sanity. I'm going to say, so the fact that I
threw a poop at David.
Well, see, now you're looking at the past. We're talking about the present.
I'm talking
you
about
can't shift the argument. You're shifting the argument. Am I sane or am I insane? I don't know what happened in the past. I'm not even sure the past exists. I could be a brain in a vat, or God could have created the world 30 seconds ago. I can't speak to that. All I can say is right now, the fact that I have argued that I did not throw poop at David, again, irrelevant as to whether or not I did. The fact that I can argue that I did not means that I understand that it is incorrect and it is a wrong thing to do, is socially unacceptable. It's the sign of a crazy person. The fact that I deny it goes to show you that I am at least currently quite sane.
So you clearly are denying that you're insane in the membrane.
Insane in the brain?
You are denying that you're crazy insane, got no brain.
I'm insane, got no brain? Insane in the membrane?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's what's happening. Cypress Hill to the rescue yet again.
All right. Well, we want to know what you think, so email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. We want to thank Troy to come on from the National Atheist Party. Troy, can you go ahead and plug all of your stuff again? We want to get all your information out there. We want as many people to contact you and your organization as possible.
Sure, thanks, and I appreciate being on the program today. If you want to learn more about the National Atheist Party, just go to www.usanap.org or visit us on Facebook at National Atheist Party. We're having our second annual convention in San Francisco at the South San Francisco Conference Center on March 9th. A lot of people are going to be there. Jamila Bay, Dusty Smith, Jessica Alquist, Jerry DeWitt, Dr. Richard Carrier. Please come out and have a good time with us if you're in the San Francisco area. Otherwise, I'll see you online, and I clearly cannot choose the wine in front of me.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, if you make it out to the East Coast, Josh and I will be very, very happy to come, and we expect press passes. So, just saying.
We can do that. And also, if you have if you or if any of your listeners has an event, an atheist event on the East Coast, and you want to invite me, or if you want to invite one of the members of our executive board to come out and talk to your organization about the National Atheist Party, we are available to do that and excited to do that.
Well, let me put it this way: we will be in contact in the future about a good number of things. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, and thanks for chatting with us, and thanks for staying with us to the bottom of another episode of Reason. We're at an hour and 50 minutes, which is that good anymore? I don't know. So
I think you mean it was 45 minutes.
Yes, it was 45 minutes. The show's 45 minutes. That was our goal. That's what we met. So good show. Good show.
Yes, good show, everyone. And until next week, farewell.
Sayonara.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.